The airport was busy. People rushed with their bags. Some were checking flight screens. Others stood in long lines waiting to board. At Gate 12, a line had already formed for Flight 708 to Washington, D.C. Among the passengers stood an older black man. His back was straight. His face was calm. He wore a dark coat, clean shoes, and a simple hat. He didn't speak much. He just waited with quiet eyes, holding his boarding pass. Most people didn't notice him, but one man did. A white man, maybe in his early 40s, with loud energy, expensive clothes, and a red carry-on bag. His name was Brian Wells. Brian looked the older man up and down. Then he scoffed. "Seriously? First class line? They're letting anyone stand here these days?" The old man didn't answer. He only gave a small smile. Brian stepped closer, pretending to stretch. "You sure you're in the right place, Grandpa?" he said loudly, hoping others would hear. A few people nearby turned their heads. The older man replied softly, "Yes, I'm in the right place." The comments. Begin, Brian laughed and looked around. "Maybe he's here to clean up after the flight," he joked to the woman next to him. She looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Brian leaned forward again. "I don't blame you. These airports confuse people like you. Must be your first time flying first class, huh?" Still, the older man didn't reply. He kept looking ahead. Behind them, a mother whispered to her daughter, "Keep your voice down." But the daughter, maybe 10 years old, asked, "Why is that man being mean to Grandpa?" Brian heard it. His smile dropped for a moment. "The gate," agent called out. "First-class boarding will begin shortly." Tension in the air. The woman behind the desk, the gate agent, looked over. She noticed the tension. She knew something was off. She looked at the older man, then at Brian. The older man stepped forward slightly. "Is boarding ready?" he asked politely. Before the agent could reply, Brian cut in. "You should wait till they call economy, sir. This line's not for you." The gate agent opened her mouth to speak, but the older man gently raised his hand to stop her. He turned to Brian and said in a calm voice, "I think you'll want to sit down for this flight." His tone wasn't angry. It was something else. Strong. Unshaken. Brian blinked, confused. "Excuse me?" he asked, laughing again. The agent's eyes widened. Something clicked in her head. She leaned forward. "Sir," she said to the older man, "it's an honor. Please board anytime you're ready." People nearby looked at each other. Brian frowned. "What's going on?" The agent ignored him. She picked up a walkie-talkie, whispered something, then turned to the older man. "May I see your ID for a moment?" He handed it to her. She read the name. Her mouth slowly opened in surprise. The name, General Marcus D. Carter, United States Army, retired. Her voice dropped. "You're that General Carter?" The old man simply nodded. Brian's eyes went wide. "Wait, what? General?" People began to murmur. "General Carter? The same one from that documentary? Isn't he a war hero? He won the Medal of Honor, right?" Suddenly, the quiet man standing in line wasn't just someone. He was someone important. Flashbacks in the crowd. One young man opened his phone and searched the name. An article popped up. General Carter, decorated. U.S. Army General, led missions in Iraq, Afghanistan, 3 Purple Hearts. Medal of Honor. Retired with full honors. Someone nearby gasped. "Oh my God, he's that guy?" Brian looked like he had been punched. I didn't know," he stammered. "I just thought—" Carter looked him in the eyes. "You thought I didn't belong. That's all you needed to decide." The gate agent said quietly, "General Carter, please board whenever you wish." He turned to Brian. "I've faced worse men than you, but the sad part is, you're not my enemy. Just another reminder that we still have a long way to go." He tipped his hat, then slowly walked toward the boarding bridge. Silence at the gate. The crowd didn't cheer. No one clapped. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was quiet, heavy. Brian stood frozen. No one spoke to him. No one defended him. The little girl from earlier said, "He's really brave, isn't he?" Her mother nodded. Final scene of Part 1. Inside. The plane, General Carter took his seat in first class. The seat next to him was empty for now. He looked out the window, eyes calm. Not proud, not angry, just steady. Behind him, the gate agent quietly told her coworker, "That man has more dignity than this whole airport put together." The camera fades to black. General Marcus Carter sat quietly in his first-class seat, looking out the window. His face was calm. His hands rested on his lap. He didn't seem angry, just thoughtful. The flight crew whispered among themselves. One attendant leaned toward another and said, "That's him, right? The real General Carter?" The other nodded slowly. "Yeah, I saw his name on the passenger list. I didn't think it was that Carter." Just then, the loud man from earlier, Brian Wells, stepped into the cabin. He froze the moment he saw General Carter sitting there. For a moment, Brian didn't know what to do. His boarding pass told him something he couldn't avoid. He was seated, right next to General Carter. Awkward moments. Brian stood stiffly in the aisle, suddenly unsure of himself. His pride from earlier, gone. He cleared his throat, tried to fake a smile. Small world, huh?" General Carter looked at him briefly, then turned back to the window without saying a word. Brian sat down slowly. The silence between them was louder than shouting. Whispers. From the passengers, two passengers across the aisle leaned in and quietly said, "He insulted that man back at the gate, and that man turned out to be a national hero." The word had spread. The quiet older man who looked like someone's grandpa. He was a decorated general, someone who had seen war, saved lives, and earned more respect than most could dream of. And the loud man next to him? Just a small voice, suddenly swallowed by shame. Brian tries to recover. Brian shifted in his seat. He looked around. People were watching. I didn't know who you were," he muttered. No response. He tried again. "I mean, you look normal. Like just some old guy." Carter slowly turned to him. Not angry, just direct. "That's the problem, isn't it?" Brian blinked. "You expect heroes to look like someone else, not like me." Brian didn't answer. Flashback, General Carter's early life. As the plane cruised into the sky, the screen fades into a quiet flashback. General Carter as a young man, fresh out of high school, standing outside a military recruiting office. People walk by him, some staring, some ignoring him. He signs the paper and begins his journey. Voiceover. "They didn't think I'd last in the army, said I wasn't tough enough, said I didn't belong." We see him running through boot camp, lifting heavy weights, getting yelled at by commanders. Then we see him in the field, saving. Soldiers making hard choices, earning medals. His face stays the same, calm, steady, strong. Voiceover. "But I didn't join to prove them wrong. I joined because I believed in something bigger." Back to present, mid-flight. A flight attendant walks over with a warm smile. "General Carter, would you like anything to drink? Water, tea, coffee?" "Water is fine. Thank you." She nods, respectfully, and walks away. Brian speaks again, nervously. "I don't hate people like you, you know." General Carter raises one eyebrow. "People like me?" Brian stammers. "I mean, I was just having a bad day. I didn't mean what I said back there." Carter looks at him and says softly, "You didn't know my name, but you had already decided who I was." Brian swallows, hard. "I'm not a racist." Carter leans back. You don't have to wear a hood to judge someone. Sometimes it just takes a little power and a bad heart. The other passengers listened by now. Other first-class passengers were quiet, listening. No one interrupted. No one pretended not to hear. Carter continued. I've been spit on in uniform, called names while protecting people who never knew my face. I've led missions in places you've never heard of. And when I came home, people still looked at my skin before they saw the man. Brian stayed quiet. I didn't respond to you at the gate because I've fought too many battles to waste energy on small minds. Brian begins to crack. Brian's voice dropped. He was no longer smiling. Why didn't you just say something back there? Tell me who you were. Carter gave a small smile. If respect must be earned by titles, not by character, then we've already failed as a people. The words hit deep. A moment of truth. A young man a few seats behind raised his voice gently. Sir, I just want to say thank you for your service, for your patience, for everything. Carter turned to him and nodded. Another voice said, My grandfather served under your command. He said you were the reason he made it home. The cabin filled with quiet respect. Even the flight crew stood a little taller. The plane flew smoothly above the clouds. General Marcus Carter sat quietly in his first-class seat. His eyes were closed, not sleeping, just thinking. Next to him, Brian Wells sat in silence. No more smart comments, no jokes. His face showed something new. Regret. The other passengers still stole glances at General Carter. Whispers had spread. The old man everyone ignored at the gate was a living legend. But who was General Marcus Carter? Flashback begins. A young soldier. The scene fades to a dusty battlefield in Afghanistan. A young Marcus Carter, strong, focused, fearless, ran through gunfire to save a wounded soldier. Voiceover. I didn't join the army for medals. I joined because I saw too many doors closed to people like me. In another memory, young Carter sits alone in the mess hall. Other soldiers laugh at another table. You sure you're in the right uniform, Marcus? Did you take a wrong turn into our army? Carter didn't respond. He just ate quietly, but his eyes burned with a quiet fire. Back to the plane. The young passenger, a teenage boy from Coach, quietly stepped forward. He looked nervous. He held a small notebook and pen. Excuse me, sir. Are you General Carter? Carter opened his eyes and looked at him. Yes, the boy swallowed hard. I just wanted to say thank you. My brother was in your unit. He said you saved his life. Carter gave a soft smile. What's your name, son? Jamal. Well, Jamal, thank your brother for his service. I was just doing my duty. Jamal handed him the notebook. Could you maybe sign this? Carter nodded. He signed the page with care. Then he looked Jamal in the eye. Never let the world tell you what you're worth. Decide that for yourself. Jamal nodded, holding back emotion. Yes, sir. Back to Brian. His thoughts. Brian sat frozen. The man he mocked for being out of place had the respect of strangers, the strength of a warrior, and the calm of a leader. He whispered, more to himself than to Carter. All my life, I thought people like me had the power. General Carter didn't look at him. Power means nothing if you use it to push others down. Brian looked away. Another flashback, the promotion. Another memory appeared. Carter stood before a panel of military leaders. He was being promoted to general. One officer whispered, Isn't he the first black man to ever lead this unit? Another said, He earned it. No question. When Carter stepped forward to receive his stars, he didn't smile. He just stood tall, proud, quiet. Voiceover. I didn't need the stars on my shoulders to know who I was, but I wore them for every young Black man who was told he'd never make it. The flight attendant's story back on the plane. A flight attendant kneeled beside Carter's seat. "Sir, may I say something?" Carter nodded. "You might not remember me, but 20 years ago you visited a school in Chicago. You told us, 'It doesn't matter where you come from, it matters where you're going.'" I never forgot that. She smiled softly. "I became the first in my family to finish college. I just wanted you to know. You changed my life." General Carter nodded humbly. "Thank you. That means more to me than any medal." The entire cabin was silent. Even Brian was blinking fast, trying to hold something in, the real meaning of strength. Suddenly, the plane hit light turbulence. Some passengers jumped. A baby cried in coach. Carter didn't move. He sat like a rock. Brian looked at him and finally asked, "How do you stay so calm, so strong?" Carter finally turned fully to him. "Because I've faced real storms. I've been shot at, left behind, called names, and told I'd fail. But I kept walking, not because I wanted to prove others wrong, but because I wanted to prove myself right." Brian's apology for the first time, Brian didn't try to explain. He didn't blame a bad day. He just looked down. "I was wrong. I'm sorry for how I treated you." Carter didn't say, "It's okay." He didn't say, "I forgive you." He said something stronger. "Be better." That's the only apology that matters. Brian nodded quietly. "I will." The plane's wheels touched the runway with a soft bump. Inside, passengers began to move. Seatbelts clicked. Overhead bins opened. Bags were pulled down, but in first class, nobody rushed. They were all waiting. For him. General Marcus Carter stood slowly. No show, no flash. Just calm, strong movement. He grabbed his small bag. Worn, clean, simple. As he stepped into the aisle, the passengers parted silently. Even the loudest voices didn't speak now. They just watched. The walk through the terminal general. Carter walked slowly down the hallway. The teenage boy from earlier, Jamal, walked beside him for a few steps. "Are you speaking somewhere today?" "Yes," Carter replied softly. "At the U.S. Military Academy." "I wish I could go." "One day you will," Carter said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. They shared a moment of quiet. Behind them, Brian Wells watched from a distance, not sure if he should say more. But the look on his face had changed. Not pride, not shame, just silence. And maybe a little understanding. Cut to the West Point Auditorium. Hours later, hundreds of young cadets in uniform sat straight in their chairs. They knew the name on today's guest list. Some had read about him. Some had watched his missions in documentaries, but most had never seen him in person. Until now. General Marcus Carter walked onto the stage. Not in full dress uniform, but in a simple dark suit. He stood tall, straight-backed, quiet. Then he walked up to the podium. No fancy opening. No loud voice. He looked around the room and simply said, "Some of you will face bullets. Some will face enemies. But most of you will face doubt. From others. From yourselves. That's the real battle." Flashback. The real battle's a scene fades in. Carter sitting in a dusty hospital tent overseas. A soldier screams in pain as medics work. Carter grips the young man's hand. "You're going to make it, son. I've got you." The boy cries, "I'm scared." "Good," Carter says. "Fear means you want to live." Another flash. Carter standing between two arguing commanders. "We don't follow orders blindly," he says. "We follow what's right." His courage didn't always come from weapons. Sometimes it came from deciding to speak when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Back to the speech. The lesson. I was told I wouldn't make it past training, that I was only promoted because they needed someone like me on posters. But I didn't fight to be on posters. I fought to bring my men home, He paused, let the words settle, then added, "And yes, I was judged. By the color of my skin, by the sound of my voice, by the quiet way I lead. But if I changed for them, I'd lose what made me strong." A cadet stands up, a young black. Cadet raised his hand. "Sir, how do you carry yourself with such dignity when so many people try to break you?" Carter smiled gently. "Because I don't carry their hate. I carry my purpose. That weighs far less and lasts far longer." Another cadet asked, "How do we handle disrespect from people who don't know us?" Carter didn't hesitate. "You don't respond to every dog that barks. Sometimes silence is strength." Meanwhile, back at the airport, Brian stood alone, near the exit. He hadn't left yet. He had asked around, searched the name, and read articles about General Carter. He stood there holding a printed photo, a picture of the general in uniform, standing beside a Medal of Honor recipient. Brian whispered to himself, "I told that man to get out of line." He stared at the photo, ashamed. Then slowly he folded it and walked away, quiet, changed. Back to the auditorium, closing. The speech Carter looked out over the young faces in uniform. You don't lead by yelling. You lead by walking through fire and not burning others with your pain. You will be tested, but if you know who you are, no insult, no title, no mistake can define you. He paused, then said one final sentence. Make them remember, not your anger, but your honor. Applause exploded through the room, not because, he shouted, but because his truth hit harder than any battle speech. It started with a tweet. A teenage boy named Jamal posted, "A white man insulted a black man at the airport yesterday, called him out of place in first class. That man turned out to be U.S. General Marcus Carter. I'll never forget what I saw." He added a photo of General Carter calmly standing in line at Gate 12, just moments before boarding. The photo went viral. By noon, the post had over 1 million shares. The story spread across platforms, TikToks, Instagram Reels, news. Headlines, "Humiliated in line, honored in life." He didn't say a word, until the whole plane knew his name. The passenger who mocked a hero. Cut to Brian's office, New York City. Brian Wells sat at his desk, his phone buzzing nonstop. His company's name was being dragged online. A video from the plane had leaked. He could be seen clearly insulting General Carter. Comments were brutal. This guy mocked a U.S. general and walked away like nothing happened? Imagine being this loud and this wrong. Cancel culture didn't come for him. Truth did. Brian dropped his head into his hands. His assistant walked in. "HR just called. You're being asked to step back immediately." "I made a mistake," Brian said softly. "Sir, this wasn't a mistake. It was a mindset." He didn't argue. He knew she was right. Cut to a small house in Georgia. Carter sat at his kitchen table with a cup of tea. The news played on a small screen nearby. Headlines showed his photo. He shook his head, almost tired of the attention. "It was just a flight," he whispered. His daughter, Lena, walked in smiling. "Dad, you always say the real stories don't make headlines. Well, this one did. I didn't want this kind of spotlight. You didn't ask for it, but you earned it," Lena said. She placed her hand on his shoulder. "The world needed to see who you really are." Flashback. His first day in uniform. A younger Carter stood in a locker room, putting on his army uniform for the first time. He looked nervous. Another recruit laughed, pointing. "You really think they'll let someone like you lead?" Carter said nothing, but he looked into the mirror, pulled his shoulders back, and tied his boots tighter. Voiceover. "They didn't believe in me, but I didn't need their belief. I needed my own." Back to present. TV interview request a major. News channel reached out to Lena. "We'd like to speak with your father." "This story is inspiring people everywhere." Carter said no at first. "Let the story fade," he told her. "I don't need the praise." But Lena smiled. "Dad, it's not about praise. It's about the young kids who need to see someone like you, so they know what quiet strength looks like." Carter thought for a moment, then nodded. "One interview. That's all." Cut to National Interview Room. The interviewer smiled across from him. "General Carter, you've suddenly become a symbol of strength and class. How does that feel?" Carter looked down. "I'm not a symbol. I'm a man. A man who spent decades choosing dignity when I could have chosen anger." The interviewer asked, "When that man insulted you, why didn't you say something right away?" Carter's answer was calm. "Because people like him already say enough. My silence said more." Scene: a school classroom, watching live. Room full of black students watched Carter on TV. The teacher paused the interview. "Do you all see now? You don't need to raise your voice to raise your worth." One student raised his hand. "But what if people keep judging us?" The teacher replied, "Then you keep showing up like General Carter, not to prove them wrong, but to prove you belong." The class nodded, their eyes full of quiet pride. Cut to Brian, watching the interview. Alone, Brian sat on his couch watching Carter's face on screen. He held a piece of paper in his hands, a draft apology. He looked ashamed, but also thoughtful. Carter's words echoed in his mind. "Be better. That's the only apology that matters." He opened his laptop and began typing. "Dear General Carter, I don't deserve your time, but I wanted to say, you didn't just teach me a lesson. You held a mirror to who I really was. I hope one day I can be the kind of man who'd earn a second chance. Brian Wells." He didn't post it, he printed it and quietly mailed it. Closing scene: General Carter, walking through the park, no guards, no cameras, just him and the wind. A young boy passed by on a bike and waved. "Hi, General Carter." Carter smiled. "Stay strong, kid." He sat on a bench looking at the sky. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't angry. He was just whole. The streets were still waking up. Shops opened slowly. Coffee steam filled the air. General Marcus Carter walked alone down the sidewalk wearing a plain coat. No uniform, no medals, just him. He stopped at a small mailbox, opened it, and found a white envelope with no name on the front, just a stamp. He opened it slowly. Inside was a simple letter. "Dear General Carter, I was the man at the airport who said those things to you. I didn't know who you were, but that doesn't matter. I should have respected you, because you're a human being. Watching you walk away without saying a word, that silence spoke louder than my insults. I've been thinking about it every day. I'm sorry. I don't ask for a reply. Just wanted you to know. I see you now." Brian Wells Carter folded the letter and tucked it into his coat pocket. He didn't smile, but he nodded to himself. Sometimes growth comes quietly. Cut to Lena's apartment. Same morning, Lena poured coffee as her father walked in. "You're up early," she said. "Just had a letter," Carter replied. "Fan mail?" "Something better, an apology." He sat down. He owned it, Lena. No excuses, no fake kindness. "And how do you feel?" "Like I'm still learning too." Flashback: Carter's early days as a leader. Young Carter stood before a group of soldiers. One of them, a white soldier, said, "You expect me to take orders from you?" Carter didn't shout. He just said, "You're not taking orders from a black man. You're taking orders from your commanding officer. And if that's a problem, you're not ready for war." The room went still. Respect wasn't demanded that day. It was earned. Back to present. Brian in a public park. Brian Wells sat on a bench holding a folded newspaper. The headline read, General Carter, a leader of silence, strength, and change. Stranger walked by, then paused. You're that guy from the plane, right? Brian nodded, bracing for an insult. But the man just said, You messed up, but owning it takes guts, too. Then the stranger walked on. For the first time in days, Brian breathed easier. Scene. Youth Center in Atlanta. Carter stood in front of a group of teenagers. No cameras, no crowd, just kids from tough neighborhoods. I wasn't born with power, he said. I was born with pressure. The world wanted me to stay small. One teen asked, How'd you get so calm? I'd be mad all the time. Carter smiled gently. I was mad, but I turned it into purpose. Anger is loud. Purpose is steady. Another teen raised his hand. What do you do when people still don't respect you? You don't wait for them to see you, Carter replied. You keep showing up until you see yourself. Cut to Brian. Visiting his mother, he sat in her kitchen, eyes tired. Mom, I messed up. I saw, she said calmly. He waited for a lecture, but she walked over and placed her hand on his. That's not the man I raised, but maybe this is the moment he starts showing up again. Brian teared up. I want to do better. Then, do it, she said. Start with listening. Scene. Carter at a military dinner. He was invited as guest of honor. Generals stood. Senators stood. Everyone clapped when he entered. He didn't wave. He just nodded. As he stepped up to speak, he said, This honor isn't mine alone. It belongs to every quiet warrior who was told to sit down, but chose to stand up anyway. You don't change the world with noise. You change it with who you choose to be, when no one's watching. Cut to Brian, standing outside. The youth center, he didn't go in. He just watched through the window. He saw Carter laughing with the teens, teaching them how to stand tall, how to speak without shouting. Brian didn't interrupt. He just stood there, learning. Closing scene. Carter walking home at night. Streetlights flickered. Carter's hands were in his pockets, walking slow. He passed a small mural, painted by school kids. It was of him, not in uniform, just in a suit, with the words painted under it, Dignity in the Storm. He stopped and looked at it. A boy on a bike passed by and waved again. Hi, General. Hi, kid, Carter said. As he kept walking, he whispered, Still work to do. 1 week later, Marcus Carter received a letter. Not a message, not an email. An actual envelope, white, gold trim, and the seal of the United States. He opened it slowly. Inside was an invitation. You are invited to speak at the National Unity Conference in Washington, D.C. Your story has touched hearts across the world. We believe your voice can help guide a divided nation. Carter stared at the letter for a long time. He wasn't a man who chased the spotlight, but he understood something now. This wasn't about him. It was about the message. Cut to Lena and Carter. Sitting on the couch. Lena smiled as she read the letter over his shoulder. Dad, you're going. I don't want to give a speech. It's not a speech, she said. It's a mirror. You're holding it up to the country. Let them see who they've been and who they could be. He looked at her, thoughtful. Then, I better speak carefully. Scene. Meanwhile, at Brian Wells' apartment. Brian scrolled through the news. Again, every headline was still about General Carter. A new one caught his eye. Carter to address nation on unity and respect. Brian looked down at his old name tag from his company. He placed it in a drawer and shut it. He stood up and picked up a phone. Cut to Carter's phone ringing, unknown number. He answered. General Carter, this is Brian Wells. Silence for a moment. Then Carter spoke. I got your letter. I wasn't sure you'd read it. I read everything people send me, Carter replied. I just wanted to say I've been volunteering. At schools, youth shelters. I know I can't erase what I said, but you're showing up, Carter interrupted. That matters more than trying to erase the past. Would it be strange if I came to hear you speak? Not strange at all, Carter said quietly. It'd be right. Scene, day of the Unity Conference. The hall was full. Leaders. From every background, civilians, students, veterans, mothers, fathers, all waiting for one man. The announcer stepped forward. Please welcome U.S. General Marcus Carter. The applause began slowly. Then it grew. Stronger. Longer. Some stood. Even Brian, sitting in the far back, stood. Carter walked to the podium in his dress uniform. He waited until the room went completely silent. Carter's speech begins. A few weeks ago, I stood in a line at Gate 12. A man looked at me and saw only what he wanted to see, my skin, my clothes, my quiet. He didn't see the years of service, the medals in drawers, the nights without sleep, protecting people like him. The room was still, not even a cough. I didn't respond that day, not because I was weak, but because I wasn't angry enough to hurt him. I was calm enough to teach him. And later, he listened. Carter pauses, looks around the room. This isn't a story about me. It's a story about what we all need to learn. That respect doesn't have a face. That dignity doesn't come with titles. It's earned in how we treat each other, even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. He closes his speech softly. I am not here because I'm perfect. I've made my own mistakes. But I'm here because I kept showing up. With grace. I hope you will, too. He stepped back. The applause was overwhelming. Cut to Brian in the crowd. Brian clapped. But more than that, he felt something. Inside shift. He wasn't proud of his past, but he was grateful for his chance. Cut to outside the building, people gathered around Carter asking for photos, handshakes. He kindly greeted a few, then stepped away quietly. Brian approached. You were right, Brian said. About what? Silence speaks louder when it's backed by strength. Carter nodded. Now let your actions speak louder than both. They shook hands. No cameras, no speeches, just two men. One who had changed, and one who had helped him do it without saying much at all. A small boy stood in front of his class, nervous, holding a picture. It was a drawing of a man in a military uniform. This is General Carter, the boy said. He's the man who stayed calm when others were angry. My mom said I should learn from him. The teacher smiled. The boy looked at the class. He didn't fight with words. He fought with silence, with respect. Applause filled the room. The drawing would be pinned on the wall, a reminder of how to be strong without being loud. Cut to General Carter in a quiet church. The pews were empty. Morning light came through the windows. He wasn't praying, just sitting, thinking, remembering. The plane, the insult, the silence. And now, everything after it. Lena entered, holding coffee. Thought I'd find you here. I come here when the world gets loud, he said. You changed lives, Dad. No, Lena, they changed themselves. I just held a mirror. Scene, Brian. Speaking at a youth workshop, Brian stood in front of a group of teens, hands a bit shaky. I want to tell you a story, he said, about the time I was the villain. The teens leaned in. I judged a man without knowing anything about him. I said cruel things, in public, loudly. He didn't scream back. He didn't hit me. He just walked away. That moment changed my life. One teen raised a hand. Did you ever say sorry? Yes, Brian said softly. And that man, he forgave me. Not with words, but with action. The room was silent. Then one girl whispered, "That's real strength." Cut 2. National TV show. Interview Carter was invited onto a national talk show. The host smiled wide. "General, the country loves you. What's next for you?" Carter paused. "I don't want fame, but you have it," the host laughed. "Then I'll use it for quiet things," Carter said. "To build, to teach, to remind people that kindness is a choice." Montage. The ripple effect. Scene. 1. A police officer helping an elderly black man cross the street, nodding gently. Scene 2. A young white boy and black boy building a project together in school titled Respect. Scene 3. A corporate meeting where a young black woman is speaking and no one talks over her. Scene 4. A billboard goes up. "Judge less. Listen more." A silhouette of Carter's face in the background. Scene 5. A veteran support group named the Carter Initiative for teaching emotional strength. Scene. Carter's backyard. Quiet evening. Lena sets down a small cake on the table. "Happy retirement," she says. "Again?" he jokes. "You've retired from war, but you started something else, a movement." He looked at the cake. It said in icing, "Still standing, still silent, still strong." He smiled. "That's a lot of icing," he said. "And not enough for what you've done," she replied.